Welcome in, podcast pioneer, to the hyperspace. I don't know if I'm Dracula or a drunk Russian person.
Yeah, I don't know what.
But I'm going to keep going. Podcasting in the 25th century, the interweb's first and still only podcast.
Sound like Tim Curry in Congo.
Listen, hush. My name is Jared.
My name's Matt.
And guess what?
What?
Well, Mike once again had the tube trots this week. He got a hold of some bad Halloween candy. So,
well, you know, it's funny. Speaking of bad Halloween candy, by the way, happy Halloween, everybody. This is Halloween that we're releasing this episode.
You're listening to this episode on Halloween as it's dropped.
And, you know, if you have been a avid listener of our podcast, then you would know that Mike smuggled into the 25th century. One of the few things he smuggled was chocolate and caused havoc a couple of Halloweens ago.
He did. There was, I mean, it was almost the equivalent of a COVID lockdown.
Yeah, it was
because
a mess.
He made everybody sick with the Twix and the assorted Snickers that he brought from the 21st century.
Well, I'll tell you the problem though. I mean, we've made some progress, right? I mean, look, part of the reason why we're here in the 25th century is to help educate and bring back everything that was cool from our youth and educate these poor drones of citizens. Halloween has kind of taken off, okay? But we have discovered that Halloween candy, specifically chocolate, is kind of like alcohol to these people in the future. They eat just a little bit and they become a mess. Mess. They become so inebriatingly like disabled. Like, look at this. These people, these are not zombies. These are just regular people that went to a party with me last night. And this is
people, yes,
they're literally hung over from chocolate. They're not these. This is like what happens when they eat chocolate.
Poor people.
It's bad.
Well, you know, we through the use of modern technology, we have for a limited time brought one of our friends from the past into the future with us to spend this time together.
Activate that portal, man.
Yeah, we've brought him forward in time, and we have with us tonight Brian the Collector is with us this evening. Welcome, Brian.
Hey guys.
Brian, how's it going, man?
I brought some candy.
Nice.
Whoa. Okay.
Contraband.
You want chocolate or
Listen.
nerds or what do you want? All kinds of Halloween candy.
Nerds might be safe, but chocolate in the 25th century is no good.
Okay. You don't want to mix chocolate in with their Nutria paste?
That could be a whole different ball of wax there. I mean, we actually might be able to market a hallucinogen to these people, some sort of opioid that is chocolate and nutrient paste. We could be like the Walter Whites of the 25th century, cranking this stuff out to people.
And by the way, guys, I have to interrupt. I have to tell the listeners at home, and if you're watching this right now, Brian and Jared are lifelong friends. And Brian just shared with us on our chain that we have some amazing pictures of Jared and himself in Halloween. And what year do you think that was, guys?
Oh man, that was probably what, 79, 80?
It's amazing.
Yeah, early 80s probably.
Yeah.
That is crazy. And you know, that's what we want to talk about today is Halloween has really, really changed a lot. I mean, compared to when we were kids, because I was born in 1975. Jared, you were born in 1975. Brian, are you from 1975?
I'm from 1974.
Wow, man, ancient.
I know.
But so we all grew up around the same era of Halloween. We all had the same experiences, just in different places. And that's what we want to kind of talk about tonight is what was Halloween like when we were kids compared to like, what is it like now? Because we all have kids, and how has it changed? You know, what did we go through? What did we experience? And what are we seeing our kids doing now? It's a different world, man.
I think one of the biggest changes that I've seen over the years are costumes. I mean, costumes now are super elaborate. They might as well be cosplayers, right? I mean, all these kids walking around,
yeah,
and they're pretty creative with the makeup and just and then the costumes themselves, compared to the 1980 Darth Vader vinyl costume and
they would
plastic.
come in the square box.
Okay, so guys,
clear plastic.
I'm so glad you brought this up.
Mask.
So glad you brought this up. So
yeah,
you guys may or may not know this, all right? But there was a company called Ben Cooper Incorporated. Okay. You know this, don't you? I can say Ben Cooper Incorporated. This company, if you're not familiar with this, listening at home, this company was started by a guy in the 1920s who was really, really into theater. He was in Manhattan, and he was designing costumes for the theater. And the Great Depression hit, and the theater went to crap. And obviously nobody's going to the theater anymore. So he pivoted his business and got the first license from Walt Disney to make Halloween costumes. And in the 1930s, started producing those first plastic masks with that vinyl apron. And and Ben Cooper Incorporated, if you grew up in the 60s, 70s, 80s, guaranteed you wore a costume from Ben Cooper Incorporated. They had the Star Wars license. They had the DC license. They had all the big licenses to make all those, like the Batman, the C-3PO and Darth Vader, all those costumes. And they were successful all the way up until, like, I don't know, the 1990s. And they unfortunately, went kaput. But it was just fascinating what kind of like American history this Ben Cooper Incorporated became, because everybody wore one of these costumes growing up.
Yes.
And I sent the group a picture of me in my Darth Vader Ben Cooper costume.
Yes. I had that same exact costume as well growing up. I wore it one year. And it's funny how they would, of course, when we were young, the safety was starting to be more of a, it was becoming more important to makers of the costumes that we wore. And so the costumes from Ben Cooper, especially, they weren't necessarily authentic to the character you wanted. Like Darth Vader, of course, the Darth Vader costume had a black cape and the apron was black, but it also had actually a picture of Darth Vader smashing out of this bright orange explosion, so you would be able to see this costume at night. And I think very helpfully, the costume actually had a picture of Darth Vader on it, and it said Darth Vader. So there would be
driving it home.
Yeah, there's no question about who I am supposed to be right now. But I remember specifically around, the fall of every year, like Kmart and Target would start filling up with just shelves and shelves of these, these small rectangular boxes full of characters. And it was like, and that's literally, for most of my childhood, that's how I picked what I was going to be for Halloween. There was no, there was no creativity whatsoever. I mean, no. if Ben Cooper said that's the Spider-Man costume, that's what Spider-Man was.
That was it. I had the Hulk. This ridiculous looking Hulk face with the green muscle vinyl apron.
The ones I remember having were the Hulk, Darth Vader, Spider-Man, and Bo Duke.
Bo Duke,
which I believe I'm not 100% sure, but I believe Bo had a big prominent Confederate flag on his chest, which would not play today. But I'm trying to find a picture.
He was just one of them good old boys. Never made no harm.
I'm trying to find a picture of the Bo Duke Ben Cooper costume. My. But
I had Yoda and Vader.
Oh, Yoda.
And my sister had strawberry shortcake.
I'm pretty sure at one time I was also.
Yeah. That's what I'm talking about right there. We're that today.
I had C-3PO. And I
Okay.
I don't think that was a good choice, to be honest.
Oh, 3PO?
That
What?
was him.
I mean,
I
that's
mean,
probably
that's
authentic
probably
looking.
closer to than
Yeah,
Vader is.
you're probably right. You're probably right. It wasn't the coolest, but they were, you know what though, but everybody wore these plastic masks. You couldn't really see out of
No.
them.
And
You couldn't
they-
talk, and the breath would start.
Oh, it would just be
like
full of moisture.
You might as well just be walking through, like, you know, the deepest part of Brazil by the end of the night
Yeah,
in the
I used to-
rainforest.
I used to pray it would be cold on Thanksgiving or on Halloween because you would fry in these costumes.
Yeah.
They were not, they didn't breathe. I mean, you're wearing vinyl. I mean, the
those
whole
things were
costume.
hotter in Hades.
Yes, it was just a lot. But that's one thing I remember is that's just how we picked out what we were going to be. Our parents would take us to the store and say, "Okay, pick out your costume." There was no thought other than to pick out the character you wanted. You know, there was no, I mean, bless him, like our friend Charlie, you know, he would probably 3D print a screen accurate C3PO costume. But I mean, back then, something like that was so far from my mind.
Yeah.
I mean, I didn't even want to make my own costume. I wanted to buy it.
Well, the best
at
part is that
Kmart.
you were okay in this because that's to your point. That's all you had to choose from. So if you were Darth Vader, you were Darth Vader for Halloween. I mean, that was as good as it got for a 5-year-old kid. That was as good as it got.
There was nobody wearing a screen accurate Darth Vader costume in 1982 that was trick or treating.
But I will tell you, in 1983, I got my first full rubberized pullover mask.
Oh yes,
which was like a lizard kind of thing, and I got to wear it to school. And I was king of everything because everyone came in with their Ben Cooper plastic, you know, face plates,
and you had the full over the head.
Which unfortunately, I mean, if you can't breathe in a plastic mask, it was impossible to breathe in more than 10 minutes in a rubber mask. But
true.
But that was the mid 80s is when it started to kind of shift a little. But I tell you, the 70s and like first years of the 80s was like the heyday of Ben Cooper because it had all the great characters that you could choose from. It was everything.
And now, if you had a lot of Ben Cooper mint in package, you'd be pretty wealthy.
I'm sure.
Because those things are worth a pretty penny these days.
So, Jared, since we go way back.
Yes.
There used to be I'm pretty sure you were involved in this family that we went to church with had a Halloween party every year. The Rose.
The Rose.
Yes.
I think one of them was named Jamie.
Yeah, Jamie and Hobby.
That's it.
Actually, my parents still talk to them.
Mine do too, occasionally.
Yeah. So we would go over there. They'd have this Halloween party every year. And of course, we'd go rocking our Ben Cooper costumes. And of course, the parents were voting on best costume. Guess who never won best costume?
The Ben Coopers of the world.
The Ben Coopers did not win.
That's not fair.
The costume
there's
contest.
no choices.
And you walk in thinking, "Oh, I'm going to win because I got this cool Darth Vader costume on." And no,
and there's like 5 others wearing the same Darth Vader costume.
And I think the people throwing this party, their kids. They always, you know, they were the creative people who were making their own costumes and, you know, not just buying them off the shelf.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but your mom wasn't making you a costume. She was buying you Ben Cooper right off the shelf.
No, that's
you
true.
didn't stand a chance.
But that's why we didn't
stand
win
a chance.
ever. Man, gosh, I haven't thought about the Rose in forever. Good grief.
So
that was one of the first things I thought of.
So so you guys obviously grew up in Tennessee as kids, trick-or-treating. Most of my days I was in Florida as a kid. And but what was it like? Let's talk about let's educate the current young listeners of the world. What was it like to go trick-or-treating in the late 70s and early 80s?
Well, for me, actually, me and Brian, we didn't live really close together when we both grew up in Knoxville, Tennessee, but we lived quite some miles from each other. So, you know, I don't think there was ever a time on Halloween night where we went trick-or-treating together.
Okay.
Me and Brian. it would usually be some other kids in the neighborhood, and our parents, like usually the dads, would go out with us, and we just kind of go around the block in my neighborhood. We and back in those days there was really no, I mean, these days, it's like the porch lights off, don't even step on my driveway because you ain't getting nothing. But back in those days, pretty much everybody participated. At least in my neighborhood they did. um and so there was never a question of, oh well, their lights are off, so let's not go there. Even if their lights were off, we'd go and we'd still get candy.
Right.
So um but we were usually out for maybe about an hour, and then we'd come back. And this is something we can talk about later, of course. But there was the of course the scare in the '80s that people were putting razor blades and nails
Yeah, that's right.
in candy
Yeah.
bars.
I remember
and
that. I
stuff.
remember, of course.
But and they're always like, okay, first of all, put all your candy out on the floor and check it for punctures. And that was a bunch of bull crap.
I only lost 2 friends
oh.
that way. It wasn't like a
Yeah.
big epidemic.
Yeah.
Of course. So but for my neighborhood it was pretty standard. And we we'd remember year to year, the places that had the good stuff.
Oh yeah.
And they didn't change from year to year. I mean, if it was good stuff, it was good stuff.
That's the real quick, that's the catch 22 of Halloween, isn't it? When you're like an adult, like you want to be the cool house that gives out the big candy bars, but
Yeah.
then you always have to be the house that gives out big candy bars.
Sure.
Because once you go, you can't come back.
Oh, there's no turning back from that.
Like
And every year,
you go all in, and you're
your
in.
candy budget doubles around
That's
this time of year, which makes me angry, but whatever. Terry takes care of all that stuff. But yeah, so I mean, mine was pretty standard. There was certain houses that played, scary music and stuff. We always thought that was cool. And I would remember my sister and her friends would always be afraid to approach those houses because of the scary stuff. But it didn't deter me at all.
I know I've told this story before, but it's perfect time to tell it again. So when I was, I must have been about 10 years old. So we had a lot of He-Man figures growing up, and I had Castle Grayskull, and my brother had Snake Mountain, my twin brother, and he always wanted Castle Grayskull. But anyway, Snake Mountain had this voice modulator. Like you take it off, it's shaped like a wolf head, and you make your voice sound all like hollow and somewhat demonic. And my father would take this, and in Halloween he would take the it was just a microphone connected to like a speaker, and you could take the whole thing out, the whole mechanism out of Snake Mountain, and he would take it and he would put it in the bushes and feed it like the 4 feet of wire that it had. He feed it into like the nearest window screen and just sit by the wall like this and wait for the smallest kids to walk up to our house. And then he'd be like, and if that kid shit his pants, it made my dad's night. And my dad was as happy as can be. And that was like, I've never seen my father. I don't think I've ever seen him so happy in my life as he did.
Scaring children,
scaring little kids with the Snake Mountain microphone modulator. It was very funny.
Well, Brian, what was it like in your neighborhood? Because, I want to tell people, Brian, actually, he bought the house that he grew up in. And it's, he lives in, so, I mean, basically your trick or treat experience has almost gone uninterrupted and unchanged for over 40 years.
Pretty much. So, I sent a picture to you guys, the one of the being a ghost, a sheet as a ghost. That was the first Halloween that I remember trick or treating in this neighborhood, that was 1977.
Okay.
So I was 3, and in my neighborhood, you could, my street's probably 0.3 of a mile long or something. It's decent little walk, and that's kind of when I was that age. That's what I would do. My parents would take me out, and I'd walk down the street. Now, as I got older, my neighborhood's a little more vast than that. There's this whole section up above. You have to go up the hill, and then there's tons of houses. And we would go up there, and I mean, I would have my little either pumpkin bucket or whatever bag I was taking would be so heavy, I'd be almost dragging it home. It was so full of candy. I mean, it was ridiculous how much candy I collected on Halloween when I became probably, 9 or 10.
Yeah.
I mean, it was an unbelievable amount of candy. Who needs the big bars when you have all the stuff that I had in that bag? I mean, it was literally like 10 pounds of candy.
It's amazing.
Oh, it was crazy. But I remember my last Halloween that I actually went trick or treating in this neighborhood. I went with my friend Aaron, and we had problems the year before with high schoolers. We were in middle school, and with high schoolers chasing us around and stuff. So Aaron's a bit of a prankster, and he decided that he would carry eggs, toilet paper, and bottle rockets. And so we're up in the neighborhood, and you see these high schoolers kind of approaching, and they're kind of looking like they're going to do something. And Aaron whips out the bottle rockets and starts firing at them, those guys. And man, you talk about some guys just running for their lives. Those guys are running away screaming and did not mess with us the rest of the night.
Let me ask you a question. Were your parents with you?
No.
Exactly. Now, this might be a tough thing to wrap your brain around, but when we were kids, especially like once you hit like around like 7 or 8 years old, there were no parents. They let you out.
Yes.
And no one ever, at least in my neighborhood, where I was, nobody ever trick or treated when it was light out. You always went out when it was dark.
Oh, you had to wait. You had to wait.
Yeah. There was no daytime trick or treating. You went out in the dark, and your parents said, "Have fun." And you went for like a good hour, 2 hours, and you came back with a giant sack of candy.
And you also, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No. In Florida where I was in a subdivision which only had like the entrance at the front of the neighborhood with like, my God, that must have 100 homes in it. So you couldn't even get to all the homes. So you went to as many homes as you could, and you went out with like your group in the dark, no parents, to homes, and some you knew and some you didn't, and some jackass would give you ice cubes. Like, who gives you ice cubes for Halloween?
What?
But you're with your group, and then you'd run into like another group, and much like Brian said, they'd bring news from the top of the neighborhood, say, "Don't go up there. The middle schoolers are stealing candy." So you start to like watch over your shoulder. But like back then in 1982, nobody was watching over you. You were on your own. You're with your friends. You had the candy. You had the bullies, and you had the creatures of the night for Halloween.
Yeah, but here's the thing: back then, if you were in good standing with your parents, you knew your boundaries.
Yes.
You knew where you could go, where you could not go, and you follow those rules.
Exactly.
And I don't think that's the case anymore. And now it's funny because you kind of cut off trick or treating when you were in, late middle school. It seemed like.
Yeah, you made the transition to
growing
giving out
up,
candy.
But now there are more and more high schoolers out there. I've seen it. I've taken my high schoolers out, and when they were in high school, and I've got one in there right now. I'm sure she's going to want to go next week or today. And my dad lives in this, or used to live in this neighborhood that was pretty good size, big houses, good candy. So we take our kids over there. And my neighborhood, I've had like 2 trick-or-treaters in the last 5 years.
Oh, wow.
At my house. And nobody shows up nobody wants to climb my hill. Nobody wants to go up my driveway or my front yard. Yeah. It's not that bad, but they look at it and they're like, no, we're not doing that. So,
oh yeah, the juice isn't worth the squeeze here.
Yeah. So I just turn off my lights. Every now and then I might have a jack-o'-lantern out front, but I go down and chill in the man cave, or I'm out taking the kids trick-or-treating in my dad's old neighborhood.
Yeah.
Where the pickings are plentiful.
It's funny you say that about the older crew coming in now. Where I moved from before I moved to New York, my neighborhood in Florida, once it was a pretty good sized neighborhood, and we had a great amount of traffic for kids. Like the kids, there's a lot of kids in the neighborhood, and it was a lot of fun. And you'd have a good 2 hours of kids. But I gotta tell you, once it hit like 9 o'clock when kids were not coming by anymore, an interesting phenomenon would happen. People from outside the neighborhood would come in. And I'm not talking about kids. We're talking about like 20, like young 20s adults.
Oh,
adults,
wow.
Not even dressed up, coming to your door with a sack.
Yeah, like a pillowcase.
Yeah. And they weren't even dressed up. It'd be like sometimes they'd have like their kids with them, but they were the ones trick-or-treating. It's very bizarre. And it's like, I never saw this when I was a kid. Like it just didn't exist.
No,
I was. So, I mean, I'm not saying that things have changed so much, but I think as a kid, Halloween might have been a little more adventurous and special than it is now for kids. It's much more chaperoned. It's much more like compartmentalized. Like towns will tell you now, trick or treat on this day instead of Halloween. And we expect you to trick or treat on this day. Like that never existed when I was a kid.
No.
Halloween was on Halloween, and that's when you trick or treated.
And you have a lot of places. You'll see this at some churches, like trunk or treat.
I'm doing that tomorrow night. A trunk or treat.
Okay. Well, or
it's not on Halloween.
No, it's not.
Well, but you'll see like places around here, like one of the malls. They'll trick or treat, and it seems to me that stuff never really appealed to me because it just seemed like confined.
Yes.
And like almost prepackaged and safe. It's like, man, no. You don't go around to a bunch of people's cars that and you don't go to a mall.
Yeah.
You go outside in the dark.
Oh, yes.
To your neighborhood, to people you see once a year when you trick or treat at their house.
That's right.
And that to me is that's trick or treating. And fortunately, in my neighborhood where I live now, or where I lived in the 21st century, we probably get 100 kids a year.
That's a lot.
Yeah, and they usually come. There's a lot of them in packs. They'll go in these giant hordes of kids. We'll have a group of 10 or 15. And then we'll have some stragglers. And then another big group will come through.
Right.
And me and Terry usually will be setting. We don't let them knock on the door. We're setting on the front porch with the bowl. We're waiting for them because that's one of the things we like to do is just sit out there and look. And plus, my idiot dog would not allow that anyway. So,
oh my God,
if every time somebody knocked on the door, they'd think that the wolf man was in there trying to kill them. So. But yeah, that's what we do. And, Terry over the past few years has really gotten, she's all about the inflatables. So we've got all these inflatable, like Jack Skellington and an R2-D2 on a jack-o'-lantern and, all these other things. I want to get a Stay Puft Marshmallow Man this year.
How about that giant Home Depot skeleton that's out this year?
Yeah. It's like,
man,
huge.
that is everywhere. I took a picture of one in my neighbor's yard. I mean, that
the one you sent?
Yeah, they put their skeletons out and they like switch up every few days or something, their poses and things. But man, that's just kind of crazy.
But that's for me. That's fun. That's kind of how I enjoy Halloween these days. Is Terry likes to decorate everything really early, and then this year we bought an inflatable outdoor screen. And I'm going to be projecting old Universal monster movies onto the screen for trick-or-treaters this year.
That's cool.
And I've already tested it, and it's a lot bigger than I thought it was, and it's going to be really cool. And we got a fog machine. We got the whole shot. And we, of course, we have the soundtrack of scary music always playing. And but for us around here, I mean, and my daughter, she's 15, and she skipped a couple of years, but apparently is planning to go this year, or some of her friends are coming over. and they're going to go out and she's going to dress up like Jennifer Connelly from Labyrinth in that big ball gown dress. She has one.
Wow.
So she's going to do that, and you know, and it's going to be one of those things where, of course, me and Terry, I used to, of course, go with her when she was little, but the last time she went, she was with a bunch of friends, and I didn't go. But you know, I'm at that point. She's 15. You know, she's probably pushing it, whether she should be trick or treating. But you know, I figure, what the heck? It's harmless fun.
I think 15. You know, you're talking, you know, a couple year, 2 years maybe in high school. I think I went out with my friends to do Halloween stuff. I don't think necessarily trick or treating. We probably just wound up going playing spin the bottle or something like that. But I'm not sure. I'm sure she won't be doing that. But that, I think that's what we were doing at around 15 at Halloween. Just an excuse to get out.
To get out and away.
Yeah. But we certainly weren't going house to house trick or treating, asking for candy at 15.
Well, so Matt, let me ask you.
Sure.
I know you have 3 very young kids.
Yes.
What do you guys do?
Well, I mean, when we were still in Florida, my son was about 4, and my daughter was very young, and then the other one was a baby. And so we had that neighborhood we lived in was great because we could go house to house, and he'd get just like a sack full of candy. But where I live now, it's very quiet. And in fact, if I get one trick or treater, it's amazing. It's like nobody comes down my street. So we take them to like other neighborhoods where like friends of ours have like live in like a bigger development, and they go and do that. So that's kind of like what we do here. And it's a shame because like I love Halloween. I like setting up the front and trying to like get it all spooky and fun for kids. And I like busted my hump doing this like last year to make it like amazing, and nobody came. So I mean, it's like I have ambitions of like what I'd like to do around here, but you know, it's just not easy. You have to be in the right kind of neighborhood to really experience. Like as a kid, this is not the ideal neighborhood to trick or treat in by any means where I'm living. So it's I think as a kid, I was really lucky to be in a neighborhood that was perfect for trick or treating. Like it was 150, 200 homes that just like you couldn't make them all. You couldn't get to all the homes if you tried. But where I live now is somewhat remote, and it's just not happening as for trick or treat. So we got to take them places to do it. And that's part of the reason, like tomorrow night, we're doing a trunk or treat, because that's like part of the way that these kids can like trick or treat and hang out with their friends.
Yeah. And show off their costumes.
Exactly.
Everything.
But it's cool because I got like a fog machine all set. And we're doing a Ghostbusters theme in our car. But
that's awesome.
But you know what? It's not the same. And to be honest, I wouldn't if this neighborhood was like hopping with kids, I would be like spending all my energy making this house out to be something great. But it's just quiet. And I'll put a bowl of candy out, and the raccoons will probably get it before the kids do.
So Brian, what are your plans?
My plans, I will probably end up taking the kids over to my dad's old neighborhood.
Yeah.
You know, might as well. And I tell you what, a lot of those people get into it over there. They do some of the big elaborate setups. They have walkthroughs in their backyards and garages and all kinds of stuff. And
you reminded me of a story.
They got some really cool things going on over there. You know, this reminds me of a story though of way back in the day when Jared and I were in church together. You know, the trick or treat kind of made me think of this. Do you remember the haunted house they did at the church we used to go to back in the day? Yeah, at St. Paul. They did a haunted house in their fellowship hall and in the classrooms.
I have no memory of this.
Oh, okay. So they did, this is late 70s, very early 80s. I couldn't have been more than, I was probably 5 or 6. And we're going through, and I'm pretty good, you know, I'm feeling pretty good about it. And then
feeling pretty good about it,
you know, and then I'm not scared or anything. And we go to this room, and there's like this mad scientist doctor who has this giant syringe in his hand, and he's just looks, you know, menacing. And I think I'd just gone and had some, you know, a checkup and had shots done or something. And I was terrified of that. And I'd eaten some beef stew earlier that night.
Oh, what?
And to this day, I do not eat beef stew. To this day. And I just totally chucked it all right there in the floor at the church.
That's amazing.
Completely disgusting.
Because you saw this guy with a syringe.
Yeah, it was terrifying at that age. Seeing this mad scientist doctor with a giant syringe in his hand about to stick somebody.
Was it a person dressed up like that?
Yeah, it was somebody dressed up like a doctor.
There's an old man right now still telling his neighbors and his grandkids about the one kid he scared so bad he puked.
Yes.
And it's like one of the highlights of his life.
Well,
yep.
Which, while Brian was telling that story, it reminded me of another story. I don't know if he'll remember this. My mom, there was a big mall in Knoxville at the time, Easttown Mall. It was gigantic, one of the biggest in the Southeast. And it's since been completely demolished. But in those days, it was a thriving place. And they were advertising this haunted house that, all the proceeds were going to the police department or something. And so my mom was like, oh, well, that could be fun. I'm going to take, were you with us, Brian?
I went to that once. I don't know if it was with you,
but the reason
I know what you're talking about.
The reason I bring it up with you is because your sister, also named Terry, was with us. My sister Julie and Brian's sister Terry were also good friends.
I was probably with you then.
Okay.
Well, I remember going.
We went into this thing, and it was like a charnel house. It was like taking a 5-year-old to like a Blumhouse horror movie.
Oh yeah.
There were like decapitated heads inside of refrigerators and people chasing you with chainsaws.
Oh man.
And we were.
Wait, what year was this?
This was like I was probably 10 or 11.
10, yeah.
Oh, that's ambitious. That's amazing. That's pretty cool.
Mid 80s. And Brian's sister, Terry, melted down so completely. Like she just, I remember her just sort of falling onto the floor and we're not refusing to move, like, and just screaming. And I do believe, if I'm remembering correctly, they had to escort us out.
Yeah.
Like she was so upset.
Wow.
And my mom felt terrible. And she was like, oh, what is this? How could they show that to children? Do that for children? It's the police department. They should know better. But it was some of the most horrific things I had ever seen up to that point, probably. But yeah, the good old haunted houses. They're also, of course, a staple this time of year, especially down here in Florida. We've got all the big theme parks do, Halloween Horror Nights at Universal and Howl-O-Scream at Tampa, at Busch Gardens in Tampa, and those are all very extremely popular.
Yeah, I did the Howl-O-Scream at Busch Gardens, but I never did the Universal Studios one. I hear the Universal's better.
Yeah, it's really something else. And if I had a, I've thought about going a couple of times with some buddies, but it's also expensive and very crowded.
Yeah.
So, but it is this is stuff, definitely that kind of thing was not around when we were, we tykes. I go into a shop now. I mean, of course they have Spirit Halloween is infamous for taking over, abandoned buildings.
Sure, of course.
and putting their wares inside of these places.
Right.
And you go in those places now and it is, I mean, it's like something like a 10-year-old me could never have imagined, like fully animatronic mannequins that they're selling that talk and, all this, stuff from every conceivable horror film you can imagine. Mm-hmm. And the costumes, while look great, but they're very cheaply made, but they look pretty solid. I remember going in there a couple of years ago and putting on a Johnny Lawrence Cobra Kai jacket,
Nice.
just like he wore in the Karate Kid, and it was pretty awesome. But these stores, I mean, especially if you're into Halloween or anything like that, it's just amazing. And if crazily enough, still exist in the 25th century because there are a lot of abandoned warehouses.
They pop up, don't they?
Spirit Halloween is still doing business in the 25th century with
Hey.
all these abandoned places around us.
I bet those costumes hold up better than a Ben Cooper costume.
Yeah. Yes, they
Those
probably
things,
do.
by the time you got done trick or treating, they were just destroyed.
Well, the
Well,
elastic would snap on the thing, and you never get it
Yeah,
back
or they
right.
would tear. The vinyl would tear.
Yeah.
Yes. But I tell
Yeah.
you, you go and you look at some of the costumes they have now, which a lot of them are in those bags. You know, they hang them, and sometimes it's like flipping through a Penthouse magazine. Quite frankly, the costumes that they're selling.
Yes.
And I'm
Some
like,
of it's just like a little piece of cloth.
yeah, I'm like, excuse me, honey, I'm going to go look at these Ghostbusters costumes.
Yeah.
So
So you know,
Yeah, it's a little bra that says Vinkman on it, you know.
yes, of course.
Yeah. So check this out. How cool is this? So about an hour and a half away from where I live is the town of Sleepy Hollow.
Oh,
yes.
that's cool.
So
But they do
it's-
some cool stuff, don't they?
And so I've been, you know, my kids, my oldest is 7 years old, and he's just now kind of getting into like the spooky stuff. So I think maybe between now and next year, I'll be able to like really work some stuff in on him and like kind of like the legend of Sleepy Hollow and all that kind of garbage, and really like expose him to that kind of stuff, because it's Sleepy Hollow at Halloween. It's like, it's huge. I mean, it's no shock that that's their Mardi Gras.
Oh, I could imagine.
And you can go over the bridge that Ichabod Crane reportedly went over, and you know, you can take the whole walking tour, the Halloween walking tour of Sleepy Hollow, and see the sights and all that stuff. And it's a real historic kind of thing, and it's old New York too. So it's just kind of like north of Manhattan. And it's like old New York and old world America. And then they incorporate all the spooky fun stuff. So I'm like, that's what I want to do. I want to take my kids to something like that and let them fall in love with that kind of real part of like, because they, you know, what's so cool about like the United States is that, you know, Europe has a lot of like old kind of like the vampires and the werewolves, and it's very old world, right? But you know, the people don't realize that the United States has a lot of very cool, like its own mythos about like scary stuff and its own stuff, its own Bigfoot, its own this, its own that. And like Sleepy Hollow is ours, right? That's our piece of like a horror, scary stuff, right? So like that's the kind of stuff I want my kids to like really learn and get in on and have fun with that kind of stuff, because there's like some really neat stuff, and there's some pretty cool stuff to scare the heck out of them. That
do they have? I mean, I'm sure they do. Is there a headless horseman that rides around on horseback?
I'm sure there is. I'm sure
there has
That would
to
be so cool.
several of them riding around. But I think that'd be awesome to take them to Sleepy Hollow, because I passed it once. We were going, you know, we were going somewhere. I'm like, Sleepy Hollow, and shamefully my wife said, "What's that?" I'm like, oh. So I realized that my job is much bigger than I thought it was going to be.
You have to educate everybody out here about what's going on.
But it's the 25th century training school is what it is.
Since you need to go back in time to tell your wife and kids more about Sleepy Hollow, we need to get Brian back to his spot, his rightful spot in the 21st century before he's missed.
It's true.
And we need to wrap it up because it is Halloween, everyone. And we want you to go out there and have a good time and do whatever you do. You know, do it old school, do it new school. Just, you know, don't go to a mall and trick or treat, for the love of mercy. So we're going to be signing off here now at the Hyperspace. We hope you have a happy Halloween. And we're going to be back here much sooner than you think. We've still got some Cassian Chronicles to knock out and a whole lot more coming at you in season 6. So again, happy Halloween, and we'll see you next time.
You know you can't live without this content. So subscribe to the Hyperspace, podcasting in the 25th century. Follow us on social media, leave us a review, and join us next time as we take you into the 25th century.